right, everyone, get ready because today we are diving into something that's probably sitting on your kitchen table right now. Salt. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And we've all heard it a million times. Less salt, healthier heart. It's like a rule, isn't it? But you, our awesome listeners, sent us something pretty interesting that really challenges that idea. So we're cracking open this editorial from the European Heart Journal, and let me tell you, these researchers are the real deal. Mente, O'Donnell, these names are like the rock stars of cardiology. And they're suggesting something kind of wild. Higher sodium intake might actually mean lower mortality rates. Okay, did I read that right?
You read that right. It really makes you stop and think when you see research challenging something so ingrained in our minds about health. You're right. The idea that less sodium equals lower blood pressure, which then means fewer heart problems, it's everywhere, right? But it might not be quite so straightforward. Our bodies are rarely that simple.
So you're saying it's more complicated than just ditch the salt shaker and you're good.
Exactly. And this is where this research gets really cool. They looked at a bunch of studies that found this thing called a U-shaped relationship when it comes to sodium and our health.
A U shape. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So picture a U. At one end, we have really low sodium intake, and at the other end, really high intake. And get this, both of those extremes were linked to negative health stuff. The sweet spot, the healthiest point, seemed to be somewhere in the middle.
So there's a just right amount of salt, like Goldilocks in the porridge, but for sodium.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't a green light to start mainlining salt. The point is that the relationship between how much sodium we eat and how healthy we are is way more complicated than just assuming that less is always better.
Okay, no salt licking contest then. So this is where the PRE study comes in, right? I've heard of that one.
Yeah, the editorial really focuses on that because it took a unique approach. Instead of just looking at what individuals ate, they zoomed out and looked at sodium intake across whole communities in different countries.
Interesting. So instead of just looking at what you and I eat every day, they're looking at our whole neighborhood, our city even.
Exactly.
That's a really different way of looking at things. Why is that so important, though?
Well, think about it. You might have that one friend who puts salt on everything, right?
Oh, yeah, I know that person.
In a normal study where they're just looking at individual people, that one person who's practically swimming in salt, they could really skew the results, couldn't they?
Right, it wouldn't be very accurate.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like taking a wide-angle shot instead of a close-up, right?
Yeah.
You get the bigger picture of how much sodium everyone's getting.
Exactly. And when they did that, when they looked at these communities, even the ones where people were eating a lot of sodium, it wasn't like everyone was having heart attacks left and right.
Really? That's surprising.
It was mostly concentrated in communities where sodium intake was really, really high, like off the charts high. The study mentioned some communities in China as an example, where they were averaging 5.6 grams of sodium a day.
5.6 grams. Wow, that's more than double the 2.3 grams that we usually hear recommended.
Yeah, exactly. It really shows you that it's not just about sodium in isolation, it's about the whole context.
Right, like what else are people eating? What's the rest of their diet like?
Exactly. And that actually brings up another really interesting point this research makes. Maybe we've been too focused on cutting down sodium as the be-all, end-all of heart health.
I see what you mean. Like, it's not as simple as just ditch the salt shaker and you'll live forever.
Right. It's like saying, just take this vitamin and you'll be healthy, without thinking about the rest of your lifestyle. The authors of this editorial actually compared sodium to vitamins.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. How so?
Well, we need a certain amount of vitamins to be healthy, right?
Right, but too many vitamins can be a bad thing.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that just right amount.
So you're saying sodium might be similar? Too little is bad, too much is bad. Somewhere in the middle is where we want to be.
That's the idea they're exploring, and it's pretty fascinating. We need more research on this, of course, but it makes you think twice about just blindly cutting out salt without considering the bigger picture.
It definitely does. It challenges a lot of what we've always been told. Now, this PRE study, did it go into why super high or low sodium was linked to health problems? Did they uncover any specifics?
They did, yeah. On the high sodium side, the study pointed to a connection with a higher risk of stroke.
Okay, that makes sense. We know too much salt can raise blood pressure, and high blood pressure can lead to strokes, right?
Exactly. And when your blood pressure is consistently high, it puts more stress on your blood vessels, which can make a stroke more likely.
Right, right. So that makes sense. What about the low sodium end of things, though? What's going on there?
That's where it gets really interesting. The PRE study and some of the other research they talked about found that very low sodium was linked to some of the same problems as high sodium.
Wait, seriously? Like what?
They found a connection with heart disease, which is kind of surprising.
Hold on, so you're saying too little salt could be just as bad for our hearts as too much salt? How does that even work?
Well, you have to remember our bodies are these amazingly complex systems, and they need a balance of different things to work right. And sodium is one of those things that our bodies need.
So it's not just some evil villain we need to get rid of completely.
Exactly. It's all about balance. See, sodium plays a big role in things like regulating fluids in our bodies, keeping our blood pressure stable, even helping our muscles work properly. When we don't get enough sodium, it can throw all of that out of whack.
Okay, so our bodies need sodium, but too much can be bad. So where does that leave us?
That's the million-dollar question. We need more research to figure out the ideal amount of sodium for different people.
And I'm guessing that ideal amount probably varies from person to person. Like someone who's super active and sweats a lot probably needs more sodium than someone who's more sedentary.
Exactly. And your doctor might also recommend you limit your sodium intake if you have certain health conditions like high blood pressure. It's definitely not one size fits all.
So it sounds like the key takeaway here is that we shouldn't be afraid of salt, but we shouldn't be careless with it either.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that just right amount that works for you and your individual needs.
So we've established that too little salt can be a problem and too much salt can be a problem. But how do we find that sweet spot?
Well, it's not as simple as just following a specific number, unfortunately.
Sure.
Everyone's different, right?
Right, that makes sense.
So instead of freaking out about how much salt is too much, it's about tuning into our own bodies and working with our doctors to figure out what's right for us as individuals.
So it's more about finding a range that works for you based on your own health history and lifestyle, right?
Exactly. And this is where that big picture view of our diet and lifestyle comes in. If you're generally healthy, eating lots of fruits, veggies, whole grains, all that good stuff, chances are you're already doing a lot of things right.
It's all about balance, right?
Exactly. Remember that analogy we talked about earlier, comparing sodium to vitamins?
Yeah, I like that one. It really helped put things in perspective.
Just like with vitamins, we need a certain amount of sodium to function. It's not some evil villain we need to banish completely. It helps to regulate our fluids, keeps our blood pressure in check, even helps our muscles work properly.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it, how much one little nutrient does in our bodies.
Right. And just like with those vitamins, too much sodium can cause problems. It's all about moderation and balance.
Right, no need to fear the salt shaker, but maybe don't go overboard with it either.
Exactly. I think that's a great takeaway from all of this. This research reminds us that when it comes to nutrition, there's rarely one right answer for everyone.
And it sounds like a lot of the health advice we hear tends to oversimplify things.
It's easy to get caught up in the latest headlines and think there's a quick fix for everything. But our bodies are complex, and what works for one person might not work for another. It's about staying informed, asking questions, and working with our healthcare providers to make the best choices for ourselves.
Absolutely. This has been an incredible conversation. We've busted some myths, uncovered some surprising truths, and hopefully empowered you, our amazing listeners, to take a more balanced and informed approach to sodium. It's not about fearing salt or embracing it as some kind of miracle cure, but rather about finding that sweet spot that supports your individual health journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to dive into these fascinating topics with you.
And a huge thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, your health is a journey, not a destination, and we're all in this together. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and keep exploring the fascinating world of health and well-being.